Commanders. I'm here with my boy Tyler Sawa from the Pride Podcast. We're talking Week 2 football. Let's get it on. Thank you, everyone, for spending your Friday evening with us. We're talking Week 2 NFL football, baby, this week. So I'm really looking forward to it. Tyler, thank you for everything, your flexible schedule today. How you doing today, bro? You all good?
Doing great, George. Thanks for having me on, man.
Of course, man. I love talking football all day long, man. So obviously we have a pretty big matchup in about 48 hours. The Detroit Lions, I guess they're kind of like the favored, kind of like the up and coming people in the NFL with this whole Hard Knocks. People definitely starting to show some love right there. What's the vibe over in Detroit after Week 1 going into Week 2?
I think it's kind of like wait and see right now. Week 1 was a game where, they were competitive. They came down to the final wire with the team that's getting a lot of praise this offseason, the Philadelphia Eagles. They're a team that a lot of people are saying they're going to win the division, and some people even have them as Super Bowl contenders. And, to kind of go toe-to-toe with them Week 1 and lose the game by 3 points, I'd say the fan base has kind of been wait and see. It's like, okay, we showed we can compete with a good team. Now, could we put it all together and maybe win a game? And I think this is a big test with Washington, where I think, both teams are kind of similar as far as talent, where they are as far as a rebuild or whatever you want to call it. I think both teams are in a similar situation right now. So I think definitely the fan base wants to see a win this Sunday.
100%, right? So definitely was a pretty intimidating Week 1 matchup. Philadelphia stacked their team up a lot with a lot of free agents and a pretty solid draft. What was the story of the games? From a third party perspective, it seemed like Detroit was trying to pound the ball, trying to run the rock down the Eagles' throats. Jalen Hurts was kind of running around. I think you guys actually got up 7-0, right? But then the Eagles kind of fought back and got a pretty big lead. What was your perception of the whole game?
Yeah, it was a really good start, man. We got the run game going right away. We had, I think, our third or fourth play in the game. It was like a 50-yard run by DeAndre Swift. And, the offense really got going from that first drive. It was a 75-yard drive, owned the TOP really well. It was just a very, very nice drive. And then after that, it got kind of dry. There was 3 straight 3-and-outs. And that's when Philly really took advantage and had a very big second quarter, and ended up taking a 10-point lead into halftime. And, it made it a little tough for the Lions team to kind of come back. But second half, they stringed along some good offensive drives after that little dry spell, and got the offense going to end the game well. So it's a little encouraging that we saw the offense get corrected in the game itself. We just didn't really have much of an answer on the defense side of the ball with Jalen Hurts and his legs.
So, yeah, from what I perceived, it seemed like the rushing game was kind of the heart of your offense, and that might be kind of like the spearhead throughout the year. I don't know if you agree to that or not. Jared Goff kind of, from my perception, kind of struggled in the first half. It seemed like you guys are more of a running team this year. Is that fair to say, or what do you think?
Yeah, that's definitely their identity. They want to run the ball and, limit the amount of times Goff throws the ball. I think if you could have a game where Goff is only throwing anywhere from 25 to 30 passes a game, you'd probably say that's successful. You want to have your offense run through the run game, own the time of possession, keep the other offense off the field as long as you can, and score points, obviously, while doing that.
Are you a fan of Jared Goff, or what's the narrative over in Detroit? Are the guys do you want to build around him, or is it kind of like a wait and see approach with him? How do you guys feel?
I think with Jared, it's really wait and see right now. I'm more on the boat right now where I kind of wanted to see a little more out of him. Right now, I'm not convinced he's the quarterback going forward beyond this season. I think he's a replaceable quarterback. But hey, if he could show me something and, he can maybe turn back the clock like what he did in 2018, string along some wins and maybe even get us to the playoffs, then he makes it an interesting discussion. Do you want to upgrade from Jared Goff? Is he the answer? I think that's when it gets really interesting. But I think from what we've seen from him here, what we've seen him from his career, I think we kind of know what Jared Goff is at this point where, he's not ever going to be a top 10 quarterback, but he's never going to be, I think, bad enough where we're like, we have to get this guy out instantly. I think he's a perfect, bridge quarterback, a guy you could win with if everything's right. But if there is an opportunity to upgrade, I don't think the Lions would hesitate to upgrade from Jared Goff. So it is wait and see. And they're going to have their options next year. They have 2 first-round picks like they did last year. And we'll see what the veteran market looks like, because it seems like in today's NFL, these guys can be flipped any second. We saw Russell Wilson this offseason. We saw Matthew Stafford last year. Carson Wentz, you guys traded for him. So
Yeah.
Quarterback shuffle's real, and you never know who's going to be available.
How much is Jared Goff getting paid this year? You know, off the top of your head, is he like what's his like dead cap space if he leaves, and what's all that situation like?
So they can move off of him next year. I
Okay.
think they restructured the contract last year. If they didn't restructure the contract, it would be a zero hit at all. There would be
Okay.
zero hit at all if they were to release him. But I
Okay.
think after the restructuring, it's still nothing bad. I don't know from the top of my head. It's nothing more than like $15 million. I think it's probably less. It's probably like
Okay.
$10 million.
Okay.
So not a big cap. It's a really big wait and see year for Goff, and that's how they structure the contract as well.
100%, 100%. So the big story, I guess, all week long was kind of like looking at your offense. Like DeAndre Swift was a fantasy star last week. I think at 144 total yards or something like that. You definitely broke it out. Jamal Williams had 2 touchdowns there. Talking to other content creators this week, it seemed like the offensive line is a strong point for Detroit, and just kind of that whole, trying to maul the ball and run the ball. What's the latest on the injury report, and especially with DeAndre Swift? And actually, while you're talking, I'll pull it up. Go ahead.
Yeah, the offensive line is banged up right now for sure. And like you said, that is a strength. That is our bread and butter for how our offense gets going, and that's how they want their identity to be. Our starting center, Frank Ragnow, like you guys can see right here,
Mm-hmm.
he's out for this game. He's a big part of our offensive line. So Evan Brown's going to slot into that spot.
Okay.
Tommy Kramer didn't play last week. He actually just got placed on IR.
Okay.
So I expect Logan Stenbrook to be your starting right guard. And then Jonah Jackson is on this injury report now. He is questionable for this game on Sunday. I expect him to play. He's dealing with the finger injury, but we'll see. If he doesn't play, then we're really, offensive line shuffling. We signed a guy, can't even think of his name right now. We signed him off the Eagles practice squad. We
Okay.
just signed him. So they'd be very short notice to get him in a starting role very quickly. So I would expect they, think Jonah's going to play this week, but who really knows? And then Taylor Decker, he missed a couple practices, but he should play. The only healthy guy that's not dealing with anything on our offensive line right now is Penei Sewell. That's our right tackle. So,
Yeah, how's that going, by the way? I know there was a huge conversation with him. I think it was the debate between him and Jamar Chase, I think was the debate, right? So last year. So I guess, for the Bengals, I suppose. But I guess how is he performing pretty well? Is he a pretty standout tackle? He's doing pretty well.
Yeah, he's been really good for our team. He's been just rock solid at right tackle, nothing to worry about, and that's really good. When you're not talking about offensive linemen, that
That's a
usually
good
means it's a
thing.
good thing, right?
100%.
And that's what Penei Sewell has been, man. He's been really good. He's been flexible to play left tackle, played right tackle, played a little left tackle when Taylor Decker was dealing with the finger injury last year. He had to miss a couple games, so no, Penei Sewell has been really good for this team.
Yeah, very good. And I'm showing the listeners and the viewers, for both of our fan bases, the Commanders injury report. We'll see how things kind of play out. I think from our end, Wes Schweitzer, our guard, he had a hamstring issue. I think he's going to miss the game. It hasn't been officially been stated, but I think he'll be out. He's a great run blocker, he's more of like a run blocker as opposed to a pass blocker. We do have Trey Turner, who, as you see him further down the list as well. He might play that guard position, but he hasn't really played at all during this whole, he's having that veteran treatment where he basically doesn't practice at all during the offseason. So he'll be kind of getting conditioned while he's getting game time. So I don't know if it's the smartest strategy in the world, but we'll see how that goal goes. Jonathan Allen had a groin injury in the fourth quarter last week. He's our standout player. Hopefully, I don't know if you guys know that over in Detroit. He had 9 sacks this year. He's a good, he creates chaos on the defensive line.
I love Jonathan Allen.
Yeah, Jonathan Allen's a beast, man. I love him. He's awesome. Cam Curl is kind of a young and up-and-coming safety. We love him over here in D.C. He had a thumb procedure last week. He was supposedly on the list of maybe potentially playing week 1, but then during week 2, he basically couldn't get his surgery and paperwork done in time for week 1, and supposedly he'll be in for week 2, which will definitely offer us some sort of flexibility back there. And then one thing I want you guys, just kind of fill you in a little bit, one thing we're kind of high on in D.C. is Cole Turner right here. He had a hamstring basically all throughout training camp. And the story was this, right? Early August, he was dominating in training camp. Just to give you guys some context, Cole Turner was Carson Strong's tight end at Nevada. He's about 6'7". He's more of like a slot, Jimmy Graham type of tight end where he kind of runs up the field and runs up the seams. He was crushing it at training camp, but then basically he pulled a hamstring, has been gone for a little while. So I do think he was a full participant, as you can see right here on Wednesday. So I think he will actually play in the game, which is pretty cool. And I'm hopeful to kind of see how he progresses because he's someone that we're definitely interested in. So for our week, so something to keep an eye on. It's be cool.
Yeah, you guys have our guy Logan Thomas at tight end. How has he been for you guys?
He's doing really good, man. Actually, so thank you for asking. He actually so 2 years ago, before he actually what's up, Roger? I see people in the chat. What's up, Roger? What's up, Corey? Basically, Logan Thomas had an awesome year a couple years ago. I think it was 2 years ago now. He stood out, had a couple touchdowns. He's starting to emerge as kind of like a borderline, borderline Pro Bowler, to be honest with you. Like he wasn't like elite, but he's like right on the cusp of that. But then what happened was he had a pretty bad ACL surgery last year. He was kind of like in and out of the lineup last year, but he started in week 1, and I think he's going to continue to play. And he's legit. Like I think the only thing with him is that it's going to be that learning curve. Kind of coming back with the ACL and kind of getting back to normal. What's that, man? But basically, I think that with Carson Wentz, what we like about it is that with Logan Thomas and Carson Wentz tends to favor his tight ends. He actually, over the past 5 years, he's thrown to his tight end number 3 overall in the NFL, where Lamar Jackson was number 1. So I think once Logan Thomas starts getting fully healthy, he's going to get force fed a lot. So it'll be kind of interesting to kind of see that. So it's pretty good.
Nice.
Cool. So I guess let's talk about the actual game a little bit, right? So we see the offensive line's a little bit beat up a little bit, running back. So just to kind of clarify, so DeAndre Swift will play, you think, in your opinion, or how do you feel about that?
Yeah,
Okay.
they asked him, the beat reporters asked him, I believe it was Eric Woodyer from ESPN, they asked him, and he goes, yeah, I'm playing this Sunday. I'm not concerned, man. He's playing this Sunday.
Okay. All right, cool. So obviously he's a major component of your offensive attack.
Sure.
What else is the winning formula for Detroit? Who's going to stand out? Like in a dream scenario, what do you want to see Detroit do against Washington next week or this Sunday?
I mean, I think your secondary is vulnerable. I think that's something that they could definitely test out this Sunday. And I want to say a guy like Amon-Ra St. Brown, we saw him last year towards the end of the season just really break out. Had a really, final 5 games. If anyone had him in fantasy football, he probably won your league if you had him in fantasy football. And he showed us a little bit last Sunday in week 1. They got him involved in that second half. He ended up with the touchdown. And if that's a matchup they could look for this Sunday, I think that would be ideal. I think TJ Hawkinson, we're kind of just waiting for that big breakout year from TJ.
Mm-hmm.
We've seen flashes from him as far as being a pass catcher, and the blocking is still a work in progress right now. We're still really waiting for that big breakout year from TJ. And week 1 was okay for him. Had a couple catches in that game. Blocking was still a little suspect. So if he could have a big game, I think your back 7 is something we could test, obviously. I mean, it's not the greatest unit. And I saw Jacksonville really ran the ball, and they kind of did it successfully with James Robinson. So I would expect DeAndre Swift, and Amon-Ra St. Brown to be probably the 2 big focal points in the game plan this Sunday.
Okay, yeah, for sure. So that is definitely one area of concern. I think our defensive line is actually pretty strong, but in regard to your offensive line, that's going to be the matchup, in my opinion, right? The offensive line versus defensive line. And yeah, James Robinson and Travis Etienne had some pretty big runs against us, so it'll be pretty interesting. Going back to Hawkinson, is this his 5th year or 4th year? Where is he in regard to his contract?
4th year, yeah. It looks like they're going to probably pick his 5th year option up for next year if they can't get the extension done. But it seems like, all signs are pointing that they do want to get an extension done with TJ Hawkinson.
Mm-hmm.
Now, could that be on pause and they might want to see another year on him? I think that's very possible. And honestly, that's where I sit right now. I'm not necessarily open to just giving him a big contract right now, making him one of the higher paid tight ends, because frankly, I just don't think he is there yet. He's definitely not in that tier 1 with like the Travis Kelce's and George Kittle's, Mark Andrews and Waller's. Like he's not there yet. Mm-hmm. And I think is the interesting question is even in the tier 2 yet with the guys like Dallas Goedert, Dalton Schultz, and those type of players. Like, is he there yet? Kyle Pitts, another one in that name. I don't know if he's there yet. He's close to it. So I don't know if they want to, right now commit to him. I think it's going to be an interesting question. Right now I want to wait and see. Kind of like Goff. Just want to see if he is the answer going forward. Because if you pay him, he's going to probably make that Dallas Goedert contract. And, I think that's a fair assumption, and which is about $14 million a year. Mm-hmm. And I just don't know if I'm there yet, if I want to pay TJ that type of money.
How's Detroit's cap situation? I'm not too familiar with it. You guys have ample money? Do you have a lot of money to spend, or how's it looking?
Yeah, so right now we are fine because we have a lot of rookie contracts and stuff. Mm-hmm. But you got to look down the line as well. Once these rookie contracts do expire, if you do want to get a new quarterback in, if that's not a rookie, you're gonna have to pay that quarterback potentially if it's a veteran.
100%.
And once some of these rookie contracts run out, you're going to have to pay those guys eventually. Hopefully, they pan out, right? Because that's the
Mm-hmm.
plan. Guys like Penei Sewell, Amon-Ra St. Brown, Aiden Hutchinson, who you drafted this year. And
Mm-hmm.
you got to look down the line. So right now, I mean, you look at it, you can get the deal done. But could TJ cost us from extending another player? I think that's very possible. So I think you have to look at it both ways. Because I think right now, unless I see something more from TJ, I really do think he's replaceable right now.
Okay, that's a good honest assessment. It was interesting. I actually went on another podcast last night, and they were really high on TJ Hawkinson. I know he made the Pro Bowl last year, so it's kind of interesting to see different perspectives on it. Because I do think he's a pretty solid tight end. I think across the league, though, tight ends are pretty viable altogether. Though I think you said it exactly right. Like he is a good tight end, but is he tight end 10, 11, or is he tight end top 5? You have to kind of look at it that way. And I think he's probably more in that tier 2 range. I agree with you. Kind of right around there. So let's kind of talk about your weaknesses, I suppose, right? So we know the offense is probably the strength of your team. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, I would say the offensive line is a big strength. Receiving core, obviously, still, it's kind of young. Amon-Ra St. Brown, year 2 player. DJ Chark is new into this offense. Josh Reynolds is really like the only veteran that's kind of been here, and even him, he came halfway through the season last year because he was with Tennessee in the beginning.
Okay. So then I guess what are the weaknesses of your team holistically? You know about the defense if you'd like. So what should Washington exploit in your opinion?
I would say the secondary. I think it's very, position that's vulnerable right now because it's really young. And last week we didn't see Philly tested too much because Jalen Hurts was just running so well with his legs, and they got that run game going. So, they didn't really test out our secondary too much. So our secondary didn't end up having a bad game just because they didn't get tested out by that much. I mean, Amani Oruwariye, who has been really good for our team, had a really rough, game 1 versus AJ Brown. He had a tough week. But I expect with your guys' weapons, guys like Terry McLaurin, Curtis Samuel had a big game. Jahan Dotson, the rookie, who had a pretty good week 1 as well. I expect you guys to test out our corners. I mean, Jeff Okudah, is he legit? I mean, he had a really good week 1, but that's probably his first good game in the NFL. He was a number 3 overall pick. He's dealt with 2 significant injuries. He's kind of getting back into it. Lions fans are definitely encouraged what they saw week 1. They definitely want to see more of that. And I think Washington's probably looking at that as like, okay, you had a good week. Let's see what you could do. Could you do it again? And I guess that's we're going to see that answer on Sunday with guys like Terry McLaurin and Curtis Samuel and Jahan Dotson. And then Amani, he's a guy, like I said, who's been good, had a really good year last year, but had a rough game 1 versus Philly. And AJ Brown really kind of took his lunch money that game. So they're probably looking at that. It's like, okay, you were good last year, but are you good going into this year? We're going to circle you. We're going to try you out.
Okay.
So I think our corners is definitely a position you guys should try to look to take advantage of this Sunday.
Yeah, we'll definitely start talking about Washington. I want to hear your perspective and how you guys view us from your end. But I guess real quick, I think you guys gave up like 355 yards on defense. A lot of it, was it mostly rushing, and was it mostly Jalen Hurts? Like, what was going on over that story? So I want to hear the more detailed story behind it, because I saw it on the box score, but near your perspective.
Yeah, man, Jalen Hurts was really good that game. Really good. He really just got it going with his legs, and the run game got going because they were kind of trying to focus on Jalen, and then Miles Sanders got going. It's a different assignment this week because Carson Wentz doesn't have the same mobility as a guy like Jalen Hurts. And something that kind of goes unnoticed in that week 1 game, I would say, for the Lions defense was there was a lot of times that game, especially Aiden Hutchinson, like they got in the backfield. Like they could have sacked him. It's just Jalen was moving too much. So it's going to be interesting this week with a guy that's not as mobile like Carson Wentz. Could we maybe finish off those sacks this time and not have a quarterback escape in the pocket like what Jalen was doing? So we'll definitely see. I think our pass rush will be better this game than it was last week. You guys have a pretty good offensive line as well, but I think we can both agree Philly probably has a better offensive line, probably the best offensive line in football. So it's not a shock to you guys at all. So, I expect our pass rush to get home a little more than it did last week.
No, I totally agree. I think everything you're saying is fair. I think everything you're saying is definitely true. And I watched that game, and Jalen Hurts, man, he definitely appeared to be a problem. He was doing all this RPO action and running. He did look impressive. I don't know. I didn't, I watched the game, and I definitely took some notes, but he was feeding AJ Brown. I think AJ Brown had 11 catches that game, was force feeding him as well. And I think they even said it during the commentary, they're already establishing that quick slant with AJ Brown, where he kind of catches it and kind of bullies up the field. And I can see that going. And the RPO was definitely deadly. And I hope our defensive line can kind of contain him, but we'll see how that goes. Let's kind of turn the tables a little bit. I want to hear, you can ask me any questions you'd like, but I also want to throw it your way. So like from a national level, from a Detroit level, what do you perceive Washington's strengths to be, and what do you perceive our weaknesses to be?
So the strength. So I actually asked a former Washington player, Anthony Armstrong. I asked him
Yeah,
this. I asked him the same exact question. What is something I'm circling when I'm
yeah.
watching the Commanders? Like, who is someone I should watch out for?
Hmm.
And the answer he gave me was Terry McLaurin. I think that's very valid. I think Terry McLaurin's a really good receiver, man. I think he, top 15, probably in that top 12 conversation, you could even put him in as far as the league. And it's a really good receivers league right now. We have a lot of good receivers in this
Hmm.
league right now. And I think Terry McLaurin is right in that pack with all those good receivers. He's definitely a guy I'm worried about this Sunday because, he's a true number one receiver in this league.
Hmm.
And we don't have a true number one corner. Our secondary is really young. You have a quarterback who is a veteran. He knows how
Hmm.
to get his way through. Now, is Carson Wentz a top 5, top 10 quarterback? No, he's not there. But is he a guy that's been experienced, a guy who could win games this league? Most definitely could do that. So I think he's going to look for Terry McLaurin in this game. He's definitely, a worry. And something about this Washington team that I noticed just looking at the depth chart, man, speed is a big emphasis in this
It
in
is
this in this lineup. It looks like Curtis Samuel for
100%.
him in Carolina, and now you guys obviously have him. And then Jahan Dotson, the draft process from Penn State, he's just one of those guys where he fell in the Penn State water. I mean, whatever they feed those guys in Penn State, man, they always have these crazy athletes like Saquon Barkley, Micah
They do,
Parsons.
man.
It was Away last year, Jason Away, the edge rusher, and I think Jahan
Hmm.
Dotson's in that category as well. Man, they just have these crazy athletes and guys with crazy speed. So looking at this Washington, Commanders offense, there's a lot of speed. And then, like you mentioned, on the defense side of the ball, the defensive line is still a big strength. Montez Sweat was one of my favorite players coming out. I wanted him pretty
Mm-hmm.
badly in that 2019 draft, and we didn't end up taking him. But I loved Montez Sweat coming out. Chase Young, obviously, he's not going to be playing this game, but
Yeah.
he was a crazy player coming out. And I think you saw your nose tackle was going to be missing this game. Got placed on IR,
Yeah,
Fidarius Mathis.
Mathis is their second round pick from Alabama.
Yeah.
Yeah, you definitely nailed it. I think Terry McLaurin's going to be a key to the game. He is. I like to call, like, I'm not even trying to gloat and be a homer, but I do think he's like quarterback proof. He's kind of proved that over 8 to 9 quarterbacks that we've had come through Washington, and he is legit. He can catch. He does have that speed, but I say he's more of like a nuanced runner, kind of a wide receiver, where he'll like catch slants and hitches and crosses and things like that. He's definitely solid. Jahan Dotson, I definitely it was funny. I collaborate with a lot of Eagles collaborators and content creators, and they're mostly Penn State fans because they're all from PA. And they
Yeah.
were like, dude, Jahan Dotson, you're gonna love him. I'm like, all right, cool, I'm gonna love him. And then all throughout training camp, we've been hearing about him. And honestly, like it was at the point, like being open, it was at the point during training camp where we're like, yo, we should like not be talking about Jahan Dotson because we want to catch the league on notice basically as he goes on because he hit the ground running. He's kind of like Terry McLaurin, like mini me. He's like same demeanor, same way he kind of carries himself. I guess one thing to kind of for your listeners that are watching as well, basically Curtis Samuel, what I was so impressed with last week was his like diversity. Like we were worried about him. He had a core surgery, he had a groin injury last year, kind of mysterious. He only played in 5 games, but then we're starting to see him used as like almost like Debo Samuel. Like I don't know if it's going to be an every week type of thing, but they basically put him like in a diamond formation. They put him in a wishbone formation in the back of the field, so in the backfield, and had a jet sweep. So it was interesting to kind of see him. Kind of create last week. So hopefully that continues. But that's kind of so we're on that path in regard to that. So
Yeah,
I don't know if you have,
I got a
go
question
ahead.
for you. Yeah. So what would you say, is the general perception of the Lions from an outsider's perspective?
So it depends. If like for me, I'm always an objective. I'm an NFL fan for real. Like I
Me
love all
too.
sports, and I try to keep it as honest as I can. And I am a Commanders fan, but definitely more of an NFL fan. Well, let me rephrase. I'm definitely a Commanders fan, but I love the NFL.
Yeah, I understand.
I think they're kind of on the team on the rise. I do think that they do have some talent. I think once Jamison Williams comes back and he starts like actually adding, I think he might be potentially one of the most explosive wide receivers in the draft. So getting him will be there. I think DeAndre Swift is a stud. I think Aiden Hutchinson's going to be a great player. I think honestly he gets a bad rap I saw with social media last week, but I think he got caught up in RPOs with Jalen Hurts, and I think it was kind of not a good situation for him, especially for week 1, because Jalen Hurts is a refined quarterback at this point. So I think the Lions are on the rise. To be honest, I'm not a huge fan of Jared Goff. I don't know if he's going to be, I don't think he's an elevator. I think he's a good distributor of the ball, and I think he kind of got away with it with Sean McVay because Sean McVay is a wizard, man. So I think he definitely kind of grew there. But like from talking to you guys now over the past week, your offense seems like it's a little bit ahead of the defense. The defense had to kind of shore up a little bit, but I don't like. I see like you guys are building things the right way, and I guess I have a follow up question for you. Like, I guess the question would be for me is Dan Campbell. Do you think he's the kind of guy that can lead the team?
I still think it's a question mark right now. Like, I think
Okay.
as far as getting the guys going, I don't think that's a problem. Like, I think a
Hmm.
lot of the players respect him. There's no issues there. But as far as a game clock manager and a game time manager to say, I think there's still a lot of question marks about Dan Campbell because there's still some things you see on Sunday and you're really questioning, it's like, what are we doing here?
Hmm.
And I didn't have it as much as I did week one that I did last year. So I think he has improved on that aspect, at least from one game sample. So I don't want to overreact because we obviously have still 16 more games to go. I want to have a full season to assess more to see if he really got better from last year.
Hmm.
But there was a couple head scratchers last game. I think one that was kind of controversy, which I didn't mind as much. I said it on my show. The onside kick last week. It was in the third quarter. They were down after they got a touchdown, tried to get the ball back. Obviously, didn't work.
Hmm.
So I think that was a head scratcher to some fans. But to me, I kind of saw it both ways. So, but whatever. That I can see that being controversy. The way that they ended the first half was kind of controversial as well, and something I didn't agree with personally was our defense was struggling pretty badly at that point, and you were only down 7, and it was 2nd and 16. They got a big stop, and then they call a timeout trying to get the ball back. Then Philly gets a big play,
Mm.
and
Give them
then
more time to get down
gave
the
them
field.
more
I got you.
time. Then they
Hmm.
got more points. For me, it was like at that point, our defense was struggling. Let's just go into half. Philly looked like they were going to get conservative, run the ball out, and
Hmm.
it would be a one score game going into the second half. But I still think there's some head scratching moves from Campbell, but overall, I'm optimistic that he can get it right. But I
Hmm.
just want to see a full season before I have a clear answer saying if I buy fully into him or I sell him completely.
Gotcha. Okay, makes sense. And what are your thoughts on Carson Wentz? I know that's not like we have a perception over here, and I can touch on that whenever you're done. But how do you guys feel about Carson Wentz?
I kind of look at him almost like Jared Goff a little bit. I don't know if that's fair. He's had success kind of like Goff. They both went to a Super Bowl. I know he got hurt, obviously.
Yeah.
And with Wentz, it's just kind of he went from Indy, was all right. They missed the playoffs in a brutal Week 18 game versus
Hmm.
Jacksonville,
Hmm.
and now he's in Washington. I just look at him. I used to love Carson Wentz a lot in
Hmm.
Philly, and I don't view him the same as I do now. I think he is kind of like Goff, like I mentioned, just kind of a good bridge quarterback and
Hmm.
a guy you could always upgrade from. But could you win with Carson Wentz? Could you win with Jared Goff? Yeah, absolutely. I think you could win with those guys if they're in a very good situation. But if you can upgrade the position, I don't think there's any hesitation from that standpoint from either Goff and Wentz.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to watch it. And I think the plan honestly is to keep him around. I think we're going to kind of like sit on that for a couple of years, and the hope is that he was kind of in a bad situation in Indianapolis. I think Ron Rivera loves him and wants to build around him. We'll see how that goes. Like, I do like my honest perception is I think he has the physical talent. Like he's 6'5", 240, can make every throw on the field. I am concerned about his decision making, but after week one, I'm pretty confident. I think I haven't seen like what it's different, right? Being in Washington, we've had kind of a carousel of quarterbacks over the past couple of years. I think Carson Wentz could be a quarterback that we can ride for like 3, 4 years, depending on how he plays. I kind of like, I'm going to say Kirk Cousins, but like I think he's slightly below Kirk Cousins. I think Kirk Cousins
Yeah.
is a great player, but I think Carson Wentz can provide that. I think he'll do some big plays to put some stats up, but it will also throw some kind of boneheaded plays within the actual game. But at the same time, we haven't had a quarterback that can bring us back. Like one thing that was exciting in week one is, we scored 2 touchdowns with the first 2 drives, 2 passing touchdowns. I think it was the first time since 2015 we had 4 touchdown performance by our quarterback, and he threw for over 300 yards in his opening game. So that was fantastic to see. And the fact that we got down by 10 and he brought us back into the game is so, that's eye opening, and it kind of brings that's the whole Carson Wentz flavor. Like he has the ability to do so. So it's going to be interesting, and I think as the weeks go on, you kind of learn a little bit more about each team. And this is going to be a big week for both of us. So it's going to be really interesting.
You know what it is, Georgia thing too. I think in Detroit, and especially me, I fall victim to this. I
Yeah.
think we were spoiled with Matthew Stafford for so many years, and
Mm.
then like the type of talent that we had at that quarterback position, it's like we go from a guy who I think is a top 10 quarterback in the league, then going to a guy, who's just really average. He's just so average. And we see all these crazy things that Stafford does, the no look passes, the crazy sidearm passes, the fourth quarter comebacks. And when you go from that to Jared Goff, like there's nothing wrong with Goff. He's just nothing special. He's just kind of is what he is. And I think that's why we're maybe a little more harsh. And not to pick on Washington, but it's like you kind of mentioned, you guys were in a quarterback carousel. You guys had almost new quarterbacks every single year. Just didn't really
Yeah.
have one guy that really
Yeah,
stuck with you
12 years of Stafford, right? And, it must have
We
been
had 12 years of Stafford, and then we
yeah.
went from Goff. You know what I mean? It's just kind of like we got spoiled with Stafford a little bit.
I was going to ask you that. So I have a friend that I work with who's a Detroit fan, and well, I guess what's the whole perception? Like, you seem to be like you're missing Stafford, right? And I guess it kind of hurts to see him go to the Rams. And, there you go. It hurts to see him go to the Rams and win the Super Bowl. But like, what's the general like talk or radio perception of him and the water cooler talk? Or people are like when he left, was that devastating? Were they like they were done with him at that point? Like, what was the feeling about Matt Stafford at that point?
I mean, for me, it was I'm always going to respect Stafford. Stafford's always going to be my quarterback, my favorite quarterback in the league. I mean, maybe that could change if the Lions could get a new franchise quarterback, something like that. Maybe that changes. But Stafford's my guy, man. And for me, like I knew the trade was coming. Once they fired the Patricia and Quinn era, and that regime wasn't going to work. It was like, how many times are we going to keep trying this? And for Stafford's sake, it was time to move on as well. They would have been his fourth head coach if we hired, if he was here with Campbell. So it was really time to move on. I mean, they needed to do a full-blown rebuild, the Lions, and that's what they did last year. They had to start from zero and just kind of click the reset button, because one thing that we were doing was we kept just trying to, fix in our Band-Aids because we had Matthew Stafford, and you could do that, but it wasn't enough for us to get over the hump. So it was just, I think, time to finally click reset and rebuild. And that's exactly what the Lions did. So the move when we fired Patricia, I knew the move with Stafford was going to come. And I think a lot of the fan base was kind of expecting it as well. And, I would say as far as cheering for Stafford on the Rams, I'd say it's 50-50 right now, maybe a little more like 60-40, more fans, cheering for him than against him. I mean, we do have the pick attached with Stafford. So, obviously if the Rams do flop, it's better for us because we get a higher pick. I think last year I'd fall victim to this as well, as we're like, I really just want to see Stafford win, man, because I saw him lose so many times in Detroit, and the guy just ended up, loving as a player and wanted to see him win. But I saw other fans, their perspective, just kind of cheering against the Rams and cheering against him, kind of for the pick. And
a lot of
people didn't like Stafford as well too. So there it goes with that. Didn't say he's a winner. So when he kind of proved that he was a winner and kind of made him eat their words, it hurt for them, I think, a little bit. But I think this year more fans are in that boat. It's like, okay, we saw Stafford win, and this is how I feel right now. Like, we saw Stafford win. Now, hey, if they lose a couple games, I'm okay with that. Give me a better pick. I'm down for it.
It makes sense. It makes sense. I'm with that. I got that whole sense with Trent Williams. So basically, I love that guy. He was our guy here in DC. He was my favorite player on the team. There definitely was like some controversy when he left, where he basically sat out a year. He had that scalp cancer, and basically butt heads with our GM. People hated on he's very polarizing in DC. People really love him because for everything that he's done. The people also kind of hate him because he didn't kind of bend over backwards to sign with the team again and mend that bridge. But I'm with you. I root for him. There's certain players that kind of touch your heart, so you kind of kind of always are attached to them. One more kind of random question. We'll kind of bring it closer to the podcast. So, who are you a bigger fan of, Barry Sanders or Calvin Johnson, bro?
I didn't watch Barry Sanders before my time.
Okay.
So I watched CJ. CJ is my guy just because I got to watch his career. But obviously, watching highlights of Barry, my dad's a Lions fan. So again, hear his perspective of Barry Sanders. That's obviously his guy. But, Calvin's a guy I grew up with, him and Stafford. That's another reason why I'm a big Stafford guy, is because he's a guy I grew up with. He's the quarterback when I started watching football for the Lions. That was Matthew Stafford, and it was Calvin Johnson. So, like, if Calvin were to go elsewhere before his career ended, I think I'd be doing the same thing. I would be cheering for Calvin Johnson as well. But, obviously he retired as a Lion, and, that's how it went. But with Stafford going on to a different team, I got to cheer for him. So I'd say Calvin Johnson, just because I never got the opportunity to watch Barry.
Does Calvin hang around the team still? Does he do any appearances, or just kind of come to training camp or anything like that, or not really?
So there was they were disconnected for a little bit once their time. It was a little, rocky ending between.
What happened? I'm not familiar with it. Like, why was there beef?
So he didn't play out his whole contract, and he retired before the contract ended, and they didn't pay him the rest of his contract. Kind of like the Colts, they paid Andrew Luck. I think Kelvin wanted that same treatment. I think for a guy that did for so much for the organization, a lot of people just kind of expected Kelvin to get his money, and I think he expected it as well.
Hmm.
Lions ended up not doing that, and it's just so petty because it was like 1 point something million dollars for a guy like Kelvin Johnson, and you're the Ford family. You think you
Yeah.
just pay it, keep the bridge alive, and keep the connection strong, but obviously ended rocky. But it seems like I would say over the last year, it's getting better. He got into the Hall of Fame as a Lion, obviously, because that's only where he played,
Hmm.
and he came for his Hall of Fame game here in Detroit, where they introduced him and everything. So I think it is getting better, but as far as appearances and stuff like that, doesn't really do that around training camp here with the Lions yet. But I think it's going to change. I really do think it's getting better. He lives here out in Michigan too, so I do think it's going to get better.
Cool. Cool. All right, last two questions. I'm consider wrapping it up. So, what's your overall perceptions of the Lions this year? Like, what do you got? What do you What do you think is a realistic outcome for your season? Are you guys a playoff team this year in your perception, or do you think it's 7-8 wins? What do you think?
Kind of like what you just said, 7, 8 wins. I think that's where I'm at right now. I think they're a team that's just trying to improve from last year. A team that won 3 games last year. And, I still look at it, they're still super young, and it's year 2 of the rebuild from when they completely clicked to reset last year.
Hmm.
So going from a 3-win team to a playoff would be great, obviously, but am I expecting that? No. I think next year would be my year where I have bigger expectation for the football team and, potentially competing for a division, competing for a playoff spot, something along those lines. If they sneak in, beautiful, but that's not my expectation this year. Just go out and compete, play hard, give me a reason to be optimistic going 2023, and I think 7 would probably be my number where I'd be satisfied.
Who's the class in your division? Do you think is it the Vikings or the Packers?
I think they're both good in different ways. Obviously, in week 1, we saw Minnesota just really took care of the Packers, but
Hmm.
Green Bay is one of those teams where they could start off really slow. They did it last year, had a bad week
Hmm.
1, got really killed by the Saints, and they just rebounded really well, ended up being the number 1 seed in the NFC. Um, it's tough. If I had to put my money on it, I'd probably choose the Packers to win the division this year. But the Vikings, as far as a team on paper, I think they're a better team on paper. It's just I'm betting on Aaron Rodgers and him getting to figure it out with the receiving core. And I like Matt LaFleur a lot as a coach. So I think Green Bay would be my team to win the division this year.
Cool. And then I guess before we start doing game predictions, do you have any questions for the Washington, or are you feeling pretty comfortable?
Yeah, I think as far as the Commanders, I think I learned a lot about you guys over, this past week, hearing about your guys' offense, hearing about your guys' defense. I guess I'll ask you the same question I asked Anthony Armstrong,
Okay.
and I kind of answered it a little bit earlier. But who are the one guy on each side of the ball where that's a playmaker for your team? Like that's the guy Lions fans should be concerned about.
Do you want more of a big name or more like an under the radar kind of name?
Whatever you like. What's
Whatever I like, play it. Okay.
okay? Yeah, give me a low key guy. I know Terry McLaurin's gonna be good. So,
Exactly.
like, give me another guy. Like, maybe it's like, wow, who's this guy? Like, why didn't we talk about him all week?
All right, cool. So basically, I'm going to take Jahan Dotson off the table too. I do think Jahan Dotson's pretty solid. So I would say look out for Cole Turner. I think we'll see if he plays or Armani Rogers. I think Washington really wants to implement their tight ends. We have 4 pretty good ones right now. We want Logan Thomas to be that standout guy. I don't know if he can play for the full snaps. So Cole Turner, John Bates, or Armani Rogers would be pretty good to keep an eye on. It would be a momentum swing for the Washington fans if Cole Turner comes out and has a big game, because we've been kind of talking about him all offseason, and we just got to see if he can actually do it. But he'll be a big presence, 6'7" tight end on that side. And then, about our defensive line. So I want to throw the attention to Cam Curl. Cam Curl basically is our strong safety. He might play Buffalo nickel. Him and Derek Forrest. Keep an eye on both of those guys. Derek Forrest had a breakout week last week. He had a 91.4 PFF grade. He was a reserve. He wasn't supposed to play last week, but he was kind of a height, weight, speed guy out of college. Cam Curl was out, so he played. He hit the game-winning pick to end the game. Couple pass breakups at the back of the end zone. So I think him and Cam Curl will be awesome. Like I keep out like number 31. He's supposedly like the narrative here. There's always like fan favorites to kind of root for. He's the guy that we're kind of like making a case with the fan base to get him into the Pro Bowl. We think he's kind of has that potential. So keep an eye on 31. Cam Curl.
Okay. Look out for them this Sunday for sure.
100%, bro. So let's bring it on home. So how you feeling about the game on Sunday? Do you think you guys are going to win? What's the final score prediction if you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's gonna be a good game. I think some Lions fans are being just super unrealistic when saying this is going to be a blowout game. I just don't think there's a team that you could say
Mm-hmm.
we're significantly better than any team. Now, do I feel confident we can win this game? I do. I know this is
Mm-hmm.
the first game that the Lions are favorited in 22 games. We haven't been a favorite in 22 straight games. And the last
Yeah.
game was in 2020. And how about it? We lost 20-0 in that game when we were favorite. So, I know, but I do feel confident. I think we match up well versus you guys. I think it's going to be a battle between both teams. But I think the Lions just have some extra incentive to win this game. You know, you have 2 straight home games to start the season. If you drop both of them, I think that would just be a really bad look on the team itself, because then you have to go play a division team in Minnesota week 3. So you definitely don't want to, be an 0-2 team going into Minnesota. You want to try to get 1 win in your home, then go to Minnesota being 500, and then whatever happens there happens.
Mm-hmm.
So I think with you guys starting off 1-0, not that you guys are going to be playing lax or anything like that, because it's the NFL. Like, that's not happening, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I just think the Lions have some extra incentive to win this game. Like I said, I think we match up well, so I'm going to take the Lions to win this game.
Cool. You think it's going to be a high-scoring game?
I think it could be fairly high. I think I predicted – I'm terrible at score prediction, but if I had to throw a score out there, I'm going to go 28-20 Detroit. So
okay,
fairly high.
Cool. I think it'll be a high-scoring game too. It's gonna be funny. It seems like both of our offenses are pretty strong and both of our defenses are pretty weak. So we're gonna kind of see how that plays out. Tyler, it was a pleasure to have you, bro. So before we get off here, let's tell the listeners basically where they can find you on Twitter and socials, and basically any type of work you're, what kind of projects you're working on right now.
Yeah, so just the Pride Podcast. We are on all podcast platform, Apple, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts from.
Mm-hmm.
And as far as what we plan on doing this season, it's our usual plan that we've been doing since last year. We'll hop on, do a pregame show, break down the team. We usually have a guest to help break down the squad, whoever we're playing that Sunday.
Mm-hmm.
And then on Sunday, the day of the game, an hour before the game, we hop on Twitter to do a Twitter Spaces for about 30 minutes, talk about all the inactives, know everything that we didn't know on Wednesday when we do our preview. And then we have our instant reaction right after the game. Those are usually the most emotional ones because they're instantly right after the game.
How big's your team? How many people do you have on your Pride Podcast?
We have me and my 2 co-hosts, Pierre and Malcolm. So those are my 2 co-hosts. We hop on Twitter Spaces after the game.
Mm-hmm.
And like I said, those are very emotional. And then Monday, it's usually the more tame. This is the more realistic one. That's really how the game really went, because we kind of had 24 hours to sit on it and see how the game went. And something new we're doing this year actually is, in the second half of every game this year, we're hopping on a platform called Playback, and we're actually watching the game live with our listeners. They can come and join and watch.
That's pretty cool.
All they have to do is connect their TV provider, and they can come watch the game with us. So again, kind of like the Twitter Spaces after the game, these are even extra emotional because the plays are happening as we were watching it. We're watching it for the first time.
That's a new wave, man. I know people are a lot of our content creators in Washington are doing that live, watching the game and doing all that together. I can't do that. I get too emotional. I care about the game too much. I get angry and I can't react and kind of watch videos. That's why I can't do it. But more power to you. Hopefully you enjoy it.
My first time doing it.
You see how it goes. My boy Roger in the chat, I was wanting to show this to you, said slaughter them 44-19. We'll see if that works. I don't know how that's going to play out. How do you feel about that, Tyler?
44-19?
Yeah.
No, it's not going that. I would be shocked either way. If you told me Washington, Detroit, I would be stunned. If one of these 44, that's a lot of points.
That's a lot of points. I would love to see it. And I would love to see it in general, but I'd love to see it on our end. But yeah, 44-19 is going to be pretty. I think it's going to be like a 28-25 kind of game. I think you're kind of on the right path right there. Hopefully Washington pulls it out, but it'll be a fun game altogether. But Tyler, thanks for having me, man. Or thanks for coming on. I appreciate it. Everybody listening, I'm George Carmi at GCarmi21. You can find me at Full Press Commanders on our YouTube or all audio platforms. It was a pleasure having you guys. Have a great night. Peace out. Little video. Hold on.